After 1,000 years of lawful prosperity, the wave of gamma-ray energy smashed into a planet that was already lifeless from the lack of trust in the Immortals. The particle storm exploded more powerfully than any believed possible, rendering the elements of the local arm of the Milky Way to the constituent particles. Hydrogen, helium, a fervent eruption of plasma left only constituent elements in a sphere 144 light years in radius around a brown dwarf star that was part of the Centauri group. Until the visible light had appeared 14 years earlier, it was believed that a star of its type could not deliver that level of shredding. And there were formed then a new heaven and a new earth. Age of the Immortals, Part 3. The Earth had continued for the epochs, time bounded but long and distant into the past, known to all the beings who had lived to see it formed. A triumph and celebration were had in the hearts of all the Celestials. Most were joyous for the pleasure and glory that were promised in a venue such as this universe God was creating, and yet some were anticipating the pleasure of evil. The tearing and pulling to gain unknown advantages for reasons they did not understand and could not resist. A measure of the Celestials turned toward destruction and control to find their status. Heading them, a destroyer, a liar from the beginning, meant a curse for a purpose that would not allow the beauty of blessings for that epoch and the future eons. The deceiver's minions gathered those beings they could to resist beauty, unaware of their future under grace and God. Those Celestials only felt that day's lust of envy and pride, and had not learned of hope. A fall, a flaw by design, brought the anticipated ruin and set the stage for the redemption planned by God before His creative original was conceived to ransom all of creation from the vanity of corruption and bring them into a liberty in the future in the children of God. Here is the third part of the story in those times. Now, for the tale of a man, one, among billions, and the few moments of his experience. Light enters the mind of a man. Bernd Henrici is who he remembers himself to be. His last memory was of the roar of an engine, two very loud, close explosions, and then he saw a Russian tank had turned toward his trench. A T-34 had rolled over his entrenched position on a skirmish line near Belgorod. He turned to run, felt shoved on his back, then pressure on his skin, then a release. Now, he stands lightly clothed in a crowded but very peaceful place. He feels whole and safe. The nightmare of a few moments ago seemingly lost in this moment. This thing that has happened to Bernd has been brought about by the ruler of the Immortals, without regard to the lack of faith shown by the mortals in the day before the event. He has kept his word. Billions upon billions of mortals have had or will have a moment to stand in the midst of this great plain on a planet, not Earth, but a new Earth. Beings, human-looking beings, who glow just a bit, are tending to people who are fearful and questioning. There are many conversations, things are explained. Yes, you expected hell, but no, this isn't that place. You're not dead, but you feel like you're dead. Do you feel like you're dead? You can't see them yet, but they are here. You will see them soon, tomorrow maybe. No, I'm not God. I'm not Jesus. I'm not St. Peter. We have a lot to discuss. A being speaks. Seemingly without raising his voice, his words resonate in everyone's chest. Hey guys, my name is Rodney. First, you're safe. Nothing will ever happen to you again unless it is known and understood by you to be from the love of the one who made all things. And you will know what will be done out of authentic love. You will come to appreciate that feature a lot. The fact that all is done in love has always been the case, but you didn't and couldn't know it in your life on earth. And it usually didn't feel like it. I know this is a lot to take in all at once. There will be plenty of time for questions and lots of teaching is going to happen. You have a lot to learn. One day you will be more like I am. You will glow with the same energy our sun glows with energy directly from our Father. You will all be immortal one day. You are now at a place known by some on the old earth as the Great White Throne. This is a place of judging, not condemnation, judgment. There is a big difference. This world is different from the earth you came from. More importantly, you are different. Father has given you a tender heart, a new disposition, empathy. But none of it will matter until it's worked out of you. It must be developed. If this is too painful for you, if you decide it's too much work, you can always ask to sit this time out. God will bring you back to life again when there's nothing left for you to do. It will be done for you. Taking that path creates a lot of loss, but it's available to each of you. Our goal is to work with you to apprehend that good and perfect will of God. Let's see if we can get you in the book of life. Like I said, there's a lot to learn. No worries right now. There's logistical work to be done, places to find, things to do, people to meet, and for many of you, people to see again. We'll eat over there at that village when you're ready. Look around, soak in the details. You might want to remember this place because this is the place where you were resurrected by the Son of God's love. Welcome to real life. Hours later, while Bernd sits in a chair eating, silent, a woman comes to sit next to him and looks at him. She doesn't stare. She looks into him. He thinks this could be a good thing, but here today, everything is new. Nothing fits the old pattern. Suddenly he feels exposed. She reaches for his hand and clasps it to her chest. He looks her in the eyes. SS Oberschütz Henrici, I'm Azalea Bost. You will have no remembrance of me. I was unimportant to you when we met. I am 23 now. I was a 15-year-old when we met. I will not rehearse the occasion of our meeting. I will only say, we met in Sudza 2 weeks before your death. You had no idea what you were doing. I forgive you. Bernd remained seated. He was stunned, numb. Sudza? He then recalled hours out of the sight of his officers, a great deal of wine, the local women in Sudza, and finally carrying out his orders to... Oh. This place may be very hard to live in as a former soldier of a Waffen SS Panzer Division. Angel continued, as a fellow human, I have injured and hurt others, and now I know the wisdom of God, His grace and love. I understand what happened and why it happened. I truly forgive you. You will see this is how it's done here. Welcome to real life. I will see you again when it is possible, yes? Bernd, silent, nodded in agreement. Moments passed. Rodney appeared and spoke gently. Hey, Bernd. It's important that you understand what happens here. Angel has been waiting several years for your resurrection, so she could meet you, talk to you, and tell you that she has forgiven the events you are accountable for. She needed to let it go. She's really growing and moving on with her life. She loves life. She wanted to be the first to talk to you and offer you her forgiveness. If you can take it, if you can handle it, you can do this great white throne thing. When she says that you didn't know what you were doing, she knows something you haven't learned yet. Let me give you the short version. Not only did you lack the knowledge of what you were doing, but you had no control anyway. You are always and ever under the wise hand of God as He shapes your life through circumstances and interactions. Even now, He has a plan and design, just plain beautiful. When I was A1, that's our term for alive the first time, I was about 50 years after you. We had a thing we called movies. You might have called them talkies or motion picture shows. I saw awesome productions, scripts, parts, drama, special effects, protagonists, antagonists, and sometimes roaring applause at the end because it was so incredible. Where you are living it now, Play the best part you can. God's will for you is the script that you follow. Be at peace. You just don't know what will be the best thing for you. Trust God. He knows. Be the you He's making you to be. I am still always amazed at what He has designed. It's a work of art. I cry in amazement all the time. For you, I only ask that you work hard, do your best, make your best choices. God has this moment designed for your increasingly glorying life, and it will be accomplished. It hasn't been long for you here, but I can see it in your face. After what Angel said, you can do this thing. You need to go talk to a few people yourself. There's a man about 4 miles down the road in a village similar to this. He once was a tank driver for the Russians during the Great Patriotic War. Even as a driver, well, I would just say he was good at his job. I'll walk you down to his place when you're ready. He's a very talented carpenter in his locale. It was more than a month before Bernd noticed there had been no sunset, no sunrise, no night. He asked his glowing friend Rodney, during a break from working on a village path, "What's up with this continuous day thing? I wasn't paying attention until I noticed it last night. What is this?" "Oh, okay. I'll keep it simple. The new Earth, where you're located, it rotates like most planets and it orbits a star. Stars have different states. Some states produce environments very different than the first Earth. Very nice for living things. We are inside of the photosphere of one of those stars, a brown red dwarf. The outer layer of this star is really a giant plasma sheath extended by its magnetic field to the edge of a double-layered cathode of this stable age system. On Earth in the past, they had all of the astronomy wrong. They had no clue that Saturn was once the Earth's star. They had no clue that stars are not giant nuclear furnaces, but they're individual nodes in a universe-wide conduit of plasma electrical energy provided by God's Spirit. All energy comes from God. Nothing, not even a star, produces its own energy. That fable was an extension of the free will, self-sufficient stuff that got everyone killed back on Earth. Lie, lie, lie. Lucky for you, you didn't have to learn that crap in school. I had to unlearn what I was taught. We are inside of the double-layered anode cathode of a high-density capacitor. That's my way of saying we're inside of what was once called the corona of a sun. They used to think this was inside of a place where nuclear fusion was happening. Did you notice the purple tint to everything? We are orbiting inside an energy sphere. Plus, we have layers of cloud encasing this new Earth, even light, rapid growth, minimum wear. It's like the place where the Earth started. All of that is why there's no day or night, why you don't need sleep, why you will barely age, and why you feel energized all the time. Power from God. Immortals like me get it from God directly. For us, that energy is all we need to live. God direct. You guys, mortals, you need a few other things. Oh, and you just haven't had a chance to learn this, but no oceans either. Lots of lakes, ponds, and seas, but no oceans. The Process, a local history. And so for years, the 612 years that had already passed, and then for the next 388 years, men and women were brought to life, resurrected. They sought their oppressors and forgave them. They approached those that they had oppressed, those they had been told were ready, and asked for forgiveness. Relationships were built and solidified. Life and love grew on the new earth. Children were born. Children grew in grace and wisdom and joined the family. There was a teaching that this was going to be the way of life for almost 20,000 years. One day it struck our friend's thoughts. Bernd could not remember the last time he had seen someone in pain. There was no more sorrow, no tears. Bernd was lucky. He had 278 people who approached him with forgiveness his first year. He handled that well. He was especially pleased to know that he would have met all the people he needed to meet within 2 years if he kept up this pace. He was actually a good man caught up in an evil time. He was grateful for what he had not done. His former Reichsführer, Heinrich Himmler, attempted to interact with all the people he had wronged. On Heinrich's third year, when he was told that the task for him would stretch to nearly 6,000 years, it would take that long, visiting with a person a day to speak with the 2,846,012 people he was directly responsible for wronging, Himmler again chose death. Instead of facing all those he wronged, his new, tender heart could not carry the burden. It would be a more bearable thing to miss 20,000 years than to truly see the depth of the evil he produced. Himmler was devastated and humbled to pain by all the misery he created. He was allowed to step into the second death, but not until he had met all the individuals he had personally killed and wounded. That still took years. He was a different man when he died the second time, entering the second death. He was cast in the lake of fire and consumed. He would always remember all of them. It was understood by all who met him that he was a pretty enjoyable guy when he was a 2. Dry humor and a lot of smiles. Had he been born in a different time, under different circumstances, perhaps an absolutely different effect on history. On the new earth, people did not speak lightly when they said, "But for the grace of God go I." During A1, religious people said it all the time. Few, if any, understood what they were saying. It was now obvious to all that none had truly believed it. Every human now lived and was living as a believer. But for the grace of God go I. But for the grace of God go I. But for the grace of God go I. Like Himmler, some of the mortals could not process the magnitude of their destruction. In their new, God-given humility, they sometimes asked for a place in the second death. They couldn't do it, this great white throne task set before them. The part that made it difficult for everyone was that memory no longer faded. Hence, here, once you had come to see a person as they were, you always remembered them. As the mind of a mortal was healed of their A1 experiences, they began to remember all of their past. There was little in the way of overt pride left in any of humanity. The immortal, who had been variously named the Apostle Paul and Saul of Tarsus, was quick to help the mortals around him, since his two closest companions at that time in A2 were a beautiful glowing couple once married that he had slain in front of their children during A1. They were a great team and had worked together for more than 1,500 years. All was remembered. Paul set the example for how it could be. Those with too much to remember, too many to speak to, they asked to skip this age. Paul did make a particularly good example because he was the worst sinner. He fought God directly and knew it. He missed the mark so greatly. He acted in spite of all he knew. Then Christ knocked him down on the road to Damascus. In this day, A2, most of his closest friends were people he had killed during A1. Some of the dearest people were those who we have been most exposed to, those who we have been the rawest with. It worked like that. People who went into the second death were usually dispatched privately but burned publicly. Occasionally they stepped into death with the voices of people who offered to support their current life still echoing in the background. Humans were still human, so they had their limitations. In their shame, some could not carry the burden of pain and loss they had created. The ones who suffered the most, the ones with the deepest smear of shame, were those men and women who knowingly lived the life of a religious lie. While they lived, many were sincere but had known they had no basis for what they preached. It was a job to them like any other job. Good money, power over the parishioners, they had status. Their suffering during the Great White Throne was the most profound because not only did many know what they were doing was wrong, but they had played the hypocrite and destroyed the hopes of others because most of this group didn't even believe there was a God until now. There were no unbelievers now. Everyone was a believer. Billy Graham, who actually believed there was a God in A1, lasted about a month at the Great White Throne. He himself recalled this boast of reaching over 500 million people during his crusades. It would be 1,000,000 years before he could even speak to all those he wounded. The lake of fire was an easy choice. He had been a pawn in the hand of the liar that had relatively led so many away from Aeonian immortality. It was good to know now that he would just die and be burned up in the flames and not be tormented forever. As soon as he realized what was happening and how things worked during the Great White Throne, he walked to the lake of fire and handled giving up his life all by himself. It was allowed. He remained sick with remorse until he stepped into the flame still alive. His second death was a mercy for him as well. God ensured he felt no pain. He was one of only 73 people to be allowed to make that choice that way. He was one of 73 who actually felt the lick of the flames. It was sad that Billy couldn't handle the burden of his past. The entire population was sad, knowing that, but for the grace of God, that could have been their fate. Many people remembered wanting to be like Billy Graham. In a village far from Billy Graham's last home, Joel Osteen heard the news of Billy Graham's choice. The need of his adjustment had been much more profound than that of Billy. Instead of the sadness felt by the remainder of the population at that time, Osteen felt relief with Graham's choice. Now, in his mind, he believed that he could take the same path and not be the first religious coward to desire death above dishonor. What vanity! Joel not only wanted to be better than Billy, but he thought he had succeeded. Too proud to ask how many humans he had offended, he feared his time in judgment would be as long as Graham's. Even with a new, softened heart, there was still a deeply rooted vanity in Joel, as he thought, even now that he had understood he had been the enemy of God, he thought he had done more than Billy. What Osteen didn't know was that, though he had made millions of dollars during his life, few humans, and none in the realm of the Celestials, had taken him seriously. Joel didn't know that his victim count was so much lower than Billy Graham's. As a direct result of his transparent deception, Osteen had only deceived a small number of humans. The largest unique gathering who suffered by his actions were a group of homeless men in Midtown Houston. The rest of his congregants went along with his ministry willfully for appearance, profits, and politics. Osteen provided a godly excuse for consumeranity, which was the dominant religion in what was called the Western world. Joel was not allowed to take the path in the second death until he was shown his vanity and how few people had followed him. When he asked to recant his wish to die, that was denied. After visiting with the 36 former homeless humans and a bunch of people he had harshly snubbed, Osteen was happily cured of his vanity. God's spirit stripped away, he was tossed in the lake of fire. Many chose the path to the second death. It was a grace and a mercy God extended to the worst offenders and to the foolish in cases like Osteen's. Before they were killed, they knew they wanted it. They knew it was earned. They knew it was a grace given by God. This place was different. This new earth was different. After his second year, Bernd joined into part of a discussion about the great city. Huge beyond imagining, 1,500 miles on a side, 1,500 miles high. It was the place where the Immortals called the Terrestrial once lived. It was the capital city that came down from somewhere else. It was called the New Jerusalem. The city was patterned after the design of the celestial realm's dimensional capital. That place was elsewhere, and in a way it was everywhere and all the time. The name of the city and the idea of it were exciting for Bernd. He was told that visiting the city would have to wait. There was an infinity of things to learn. Bernd also learned he had eternity to learn them. It was in his 6th year that Bernd discovered that most of the insect and animal life surrounding him was old life. The catalyst for the discovery was when Bernd found a dog from his youth. Hund was his name. A not so imaginative name. Hund was crushed by a runaway cart in the town where Bernd grew up. This dog recognized Bernd, introduced itself as best it could, and continued to its home, to its family. Hund said the family he lived with were expecting him back soon. Hund was a bit directionally challenged and was just delivering a note across the valley to build his travel skills and save his friends the trip. It was in his 6th year that Bernd was given a child. With the gift of his child, with Angel, he learned this child had once lived for 2 minutes. She was from a place called Epirus. At birth, her A1 father saw she was a female, stabbed her and slashed the throat of the mother, his wife, for her failure to produce a male child again. Bernd learned that Epirus, so she was named, Epirus's first father, would not be resurrected until she was a young adult. Epirus and her father had things to discuss that only adults can discuss in equity. Her father would need someone to help him through the layers and piles of death he had created more than 2 centuries before Christ. God knew she would be able to help him in a way no one else could. Epirus would help her father. Her father would then be there for Phyrus. Her father had been a leader serving under Phyrus, and there had been a plan for Phyrus that didn't include the second death. There were a large number of warriors and leaders from the time predating Rome. They didn't know Phyrus, but they would recognize his presence and the type of character he had in his prime. They would need his example. That was the point, wasn't it? God knew what he was doing. He was working all for good, and now the people of the human species were coming to know that truth as only his followers had known truth on the old earth. There was a lot of talk that Adam and Eve would be 2 of the last people resurrected. They had already lived through almost 1,000 years in their A1 life, so no one thought they would be bothered missing the first 800, 900 years of this eon, of the eons. There was excitement about when the parents of our kind would arrive. They would meet their whole family. That was the point, and that was the issue. The 2 of them, Adam and Eve, would need more time than anyone else to meet those they had made to stumble. It was universally understood that neither Adam nor Eve would be given the expectation of seeking forgiveness from all the humans who had ever lived, nor would it be the case that anyone would offer them forgiveness. People would just meet them and form a relationship, and it would never be an issue. They would eventually get it. They would eventually understand the tragedy that had been born from them, but only because of a slow absorption, and only after they had acquired a solid apprehension of both God's grace to justify and his sovereignty to make all he desired come to fruition. When they understood they were accountable but in no way responsible, only then could they be told the impact of their choices. No one wanted them to try to step out of the burden. No one wanted them to feel the crush of guilt that might edge them. Adam and Eve were a bit like Judas. The first couple and Judas had been given special jobs that were assigned to them before the origin of the curse. While being the necessary precondition for the greatest events and blessings of all time, it was still a thing that could trouble someone deeply. Judas was another misunderstood person. His role had been written into the book of the Word of God generations before he was born. He was chosen for that purpose. When he appeared before the council to confess his error, he was forgiven and repentant by law before his death, and so was still in the position of a servant to God. All people appreciated that without his role, they would not have had that sacrifice to satisfy their greatest need. God did not make this easy or straightforward when it came to what he was doing through humans. It was always his will. The conflicted truth was certain, but for the grace of God. So it went for the eon. There was a day, more precisely, there was a time, there were no days, when it's communicated in detail what God's intention for all of the fallen celestial beings was to be, and how his intention was to be carried out. Things had been coming to pass for millennia, and most humans had been oblivious to the events.